Thank you so much for coming in. I see all the cool kids are in the back. Why is there never anybody in the front 2 rows? Because there's cameras. Okay, that is a legitimate answer. Thank you for that. So how many of you have started thinking about your career after school? A couple of you, good job. Who wants to be a meteorologist? No hands. Okay, well, I'm going to teach you about weather anyway. Like she mentioned, I am a meteorologist. My first degree is in journalism. I left high school, went to Chico State and studied news editorial, which is newspaper writing, and then really wanted to get into TV, so I did 7 internships in both radio and TV, all working for free while mopping the floors at Starbucks, and I was working about 60 hours a week. You don't have to do that. There are many internships, especially related to STEM, that are paid. So if you're looking at journalism, maybe steer away from that because it doesn't pay very well in the beginning, but it's a lot of fun. And so then I became a producer at an NBC station in Washington for a few months, and then I was able to get an on-air job in Oklahoma, and that's where I first fell in love with storm chasing. I would go out with our meteorologists, and to this day, I've been storm chasing about 20 times, and I have never seen a tornado in real life. So that shows you just how rare these weather phenomena are, but it's actually kind of interesting when they come straight towards your house, and that's why you need meteorologists to tell you what's happening. So I'll start with my job now. I'm a multimedia journalist, and that encompasses many things. You can see our camera here with the KHSD in the center. We also have my photographer here from KGET. He does everything. He runs the camera, he can do editing, he does all of the interviews out and about, gets all of the incredible video. He's watching the video, the sound, putting together beautiful stories. For decades, from the 50s through the early 90s, we would just do everything for television broadcast, and we were telling you, wait until 5, get the latest news tonight at 5. Now everything is digital, and you're getting your news from us on your phones right away. So we have the fastest deadlines ever. We will send you a push alert. You can click on it and see the full article before I've even presented it to you at noon. We have an amazing court reporter named Jason, and he is in the court sending me information before he's even back at the station. And I can get an update on our midday forecast from our phones. So journalism is just incredible the way it's evolved. And then of course, I'm a meteorologist, a scientist who studies the atmosphere, and we use our findings to understand and predict the weather. That's the hardest thing, is I'm trying to be a fortune teller. I'm putting all of these parameters in place and saying, I think it's gonna rain, or I think it's not gonna rain. And then in the end, what actually happens? Sometimes we're spot on. Meteorologists these days are about 95% accurate. That's for a rain event. When it comes to a tornado, we can tell you the path, the timing, but there's a cone of what we call uncertainty. Is it gonna veer to the left? Is it gonna veer to the right? And that's why when you're watching storm coverage, you'll see different parameters, because we have to watch and see what the storm is actually doing as we're forecasting it. So I know you guys are kids and you like memes, so this is one of my favorites. Society thinks as a meteorologist I just stare at the clouds, which I do. I think I'm an Einstein, not really, he's a genius, but I see myself doing a lot of math, doing a lot of outreach to teach people what we're doing, why the weather is so hard to predict, why it's so fun to have this job. My grandma thinks I'm studying actual meteors. My friends think I'm a storm chaser, like down there at the bottom left. That is a real picture from the Dominator, and we'll talk about Reed Timmer in a minute. What I actually do is stare lifelessly at my computer all day. It's not very exciting. And then what people think I do, which I actually do, a very small percentage of us are also television meteorologists. So if you're interested in this as a career, you want to start looking into it, TV is a small branch. You see the green screen up there at the top. You also have the video techs in the background who, if you're watching the Weather Channel, every single person on their staff is a meteorologist. You don't have to be on air to be doing what we do. We have the instrumentation that is all monitored by engineers. We have synoptic meteorologists. There are research meteorologists. We have people studying ice decay on the Great Lakes and at the poles. We have meteorologists studying hurricanes. There are all sorts of different careers that you could take. So we have the public sector, obviously military, federal, that's the National Weather Service and NOAA, state government. Private sector is media, that's me, commercial companies. Disneyland has 2 full-time meteorologists. I really want that job. There's academia, postgraduate research, professorships. If you're reading studies, most of that is academia. So then let's get into actual weather. The weather versus the climate. You'll hear a lot of people talk about climate change. We're not going to get political here, you guys don't care. But if you hear the debate that's going on, a lot of people will confuse these two. Climate is what's happened over a 30-year span. So our climate here in Bakersfield is about 6 inches a year. When we assess that rain again in 10 years, it may only be 5 inches a year. That's our climate. The weather is what happened on Monday. That big rainstorm we had that came in and gave us a 6/10 of an inch. I almost said a sixth. That's a weather event. So when you hear people talking about a long hot spell, that's weather. When you hear people talking about global change, global warming, that's all climate. And then politics gets tangled up in the two. So this is what I do. This is what I'm staring at when I'm on my computer. Up at the very top left, that's a radiosonde. That's the actual instrument that we send up into the air every 12 hours. Down at the bottom left, that's the launch site. You can see the Doppler on top. That's the big white dome. That has that beam that's constantly looking out for rain for us here at the ground. The weather balloon is filled up and then it's launched. As it goes into the atmosphere, it's giving us temperature, wind, rain, dew point. The top right is my hodograph. And then you can see all of these charts. The little bars there are my wind direction and speed. So this prediction, I can look at that and say, that looks like snow. This is obviously not from Bakersfield. We just learned as you guys were walking in that my YouTube videos are blocked from the Wi-Fi that we have here. So unfortunately, that was a neat 60-second launch of a balloon. After about 2 hours, the balloon will burst and that radiosonde will fall back down. It has writing all over it that says this is not dangerous. If you find it, please return it to the National Weather Service or a NOAA office. You can just throw it away as well. We ask that you recycle. One of the problems that we have about this is a weather balloon, even though we've been doing it for decades, is still the best possible way for us to get upper air soundings, and we're littering. So as environmentalists, this is a really difficult thing for us to be littering twice a day at every single National Weather Service office across the country. So this is a little long. I put my speaker notes in here, but you can just follow along. If you're interested in weather and the first meteorologists, this is obviously a movie that was dramatized a little bit. It's about half correct, but it's really interesting about a man in the 1800s who actually flew up in a hot air balloon and nearly froze to death to get us our first soundings. This man, Joseph Henry, is kind of known as the father of meteorology. You can see back in the late 1800s and 1900s, we were getting different ice patrols and different ways to forecast the weather. But obviously the weather goes back to the ancient Greeks, and you can hear sailors talking about red sky in morning, sailors take warning, red sky at night, sailors delight. That was them on the ocean being able to tell how the sun was rising or setting and how much moisture and instability they had in their atmosphere. So we have the Titanic disaster at 1912. So we were talking about the International Ice Patrol being established after that. Meteorologists, since that calamity, have saved thousands, hundreds of thousands of lives. Norwegian meteorologists in 1917 started talking about air mass. But keep in mind, the first flight by the Wright brothers was 1903. So we didn't have airplanes until about 120 years ago. Here's the history of meteorology with our balloons. You can see that they started in the 30s. We're still launching them decades later. 2009, they have advanced instrumentation, but it's just a balloon. Getting into some of the more fun stuff, this is a tornado on the ground. This was actually an answer in Final Jeopardy a couple days ago. In the 40s, you weren't allowed to say tornado on the air because they thought it was too scary. And so by not warning people at all, that doesn't save lives, that doesn't help anyone. And so we were able in the 40s to start forecasting tornadoes on the air with the limited parameters that we had to be able to watch them and warn people in towns if they were coming. Tornado sirens were invented soon afterward. And then we started talking about radars. This is 1954. That is what a hurricane looked like when it was coming at the radar. So it's basically the hurricane is here and now we can see it. So then they knew that they wanted to get up into space. That top left, fun fact, it was April 1st, 1960. It was exactly, 62 years ago today that we launched the first weather satellite. It's still up there, it's space junk, it's probably shredded to pieces by now. Another thing is environmentalists, it's hard for us to litter and see that that's up there, but there's no way to really bring it down. I love the 60s graphic talking about the engineering and the technology that we had inside of it. We then had the first television pictures from space. In the 60s, you can see the clouds. This is compared to a few years later, 1969, Hurricane Camille. That was a Category 5 that killed thousands of people, I think. It was a very devastating storm. Oh, That was Neil Armstrong walking on the moon. So meteorologists help. It is going to play. I think it's because it's a NASA graphic. Meteorologists and mathematicians, if you've seen, I'm going to blank on it. What's that movie of the women? Came out a couple years ago, the black women? Hidden Figures. That's the mathematicians, the women who helped with the man on the moon. Meteorologists played a huge part in this as well. Obviously, photographers and all of the technology we had to show him coming down the ladder and bouncing along. It's amazing, him and Buzz. So that's the moon. When we were talking about advancing radar, we also started shooting the first beams of our radar against the moon to see if it would work. Here we go. I don't think I'm going to get this into presentation mode again. That's fine. So we advanced to the 1970s, more radar. National Weather Service got the WSR-74, so we keep advancing. And then as our radar is advancing, you can see we got GOES 13, GOES 4.7, GOES 8.2. We are now up to the latest launch was just a couple weeks ago of GOES T, and that's because our latest launch of the GOES series had a problem during the time change. It would completely glitch for the entire month of spring that the time was changing and the entire month of fall that the time was changing back. So it was a small little engineering flaw that made this multi-billion-dollar satellite inadequate, and they had to launch a brand new one a year later. So we spend a lot of money, but one of the most important things about the GOES-R and the GOES S and T series is that they have lightning detection, and that is helping to revolutionize tornadoes because they begin as thunderstorms as they grow, and then the tornado is just a little funnel cloud that lifts from underneath. So now that we can see lightning, we have early detection that we never had before. These pictures are current, but this is a look back at 1976 as we started getting more and more Doppler radar. This, I'm going to shout at you. This is still what I see today. So this is inbound and outbound. This is a debris ball. So that's an active tornado on the ground. I can just look at colors on a map and be able to tell where a tornado is. But again, that's already happening. So now I can watch it as it's going and say, okay, people in these counties, you need to be on lockdown. People in these counties, you need to take shelter now. But it's already on the ground. It's minutes away. We need faster detection for these tornadoes before they're forming. Right now, we can give people about a 15 to 20 minute warning. So now with our WSR-88D, you can see the build of a thunderstorm. We can now see higher with our dual pole radar to be able to see the snow, which is turning to hail, which is turning to rain. Hail is actually a semi-frozen mix that starts to roll and tumble. And we have so much updraft in thunderstorms that the ice keeps getting bigger. And now, I know you guys are older, but I'm gonna give you my hail kit, because I think it's interesting. So here in Kern County, we get marble-sized hail, right? It's pretty heavy. That's a heavy raindrop for wind to keep aloft. When we're counting on hail, it goes up in the sizes of coins. So you have a dime and a penny, even though one is worth more than the other, it's just size. You can get up to nickel-sized hail. You can get up to quarters, half dollars. And again, this is a diameter. So imagine this is a full ping pong ball or a golf ball of ice coming down towards you. That's why you hear a lot of people talk about severe thunderstorms and tornadoes sounding like a freight train. There are thousands of these, egg shape, and they're all different shapes too, falling from the sky. You can get up to tennis balls, chunks of ice. The largest I've ever seen out storm chasing is baseballs, and they're heavier than this. This is filled with what, yarn? This is pure ice if it's hail. You can get softballs. And the largest hail ever recorded, this is supposed to be a grapefruit, 7 inches in diameter. It fell in South Dakota. Could you imagine that falling on your house or your car? It's terrifying. And that's why we need early detection. We need to get people away from tornadoes as much as severe weather like hail. Twister. How many have seen this terrible movie? It's one of the best movies in the world. I love it so much. It's awful, and it's so good. It's so good. So 1996, I was in 6th grade. My parents let me see it. I don't know why. It was a little too violent back then for somebody that young, but I loved it. And myself, Ginger Z, many meteorologists across the country were inspired by this. It's my YouTube video. This is Reed Timmer. Have you guys seen him? The extreme meteorologist. He drives around in the Dominator. He built this tank of a car that he then slams down to the ground. and he is able to measure tornadoes. You can see the wall rotation, and then the little tiny point underneath his finger, that's becoming a tornado. So he goes out, he works for AccuWeather now, he's an actual meteorologist, and he goes out storm chasing. I wonder if this NBC video will play. The YouTube one won't. Nope, it's all blocked. Bummer. But it's really interesting to watch him at work. This is Tim Samaras. Again, this is National Geographic, so I don't know if this will play. It will. This is a really sad story. So Tim Samaras is a lot like Reed Timmer in that he goes out and intercepts storms kind of like Twister did. They were dropping the Dorothy right in the path of a storm, hoping to launch the little sensors up into the storm. Tim Samaras is an engineer and meteorologist who actually started doing this with these little cones, and he was killed in a severe tornado, him and his research partner and his son who was driving in the El Reno tornado in 2013. So this is a dedication to some of his work, some of the video that he took, some of the instrumentation he was able to drop on the ground for us as meteorologists. He did have several intercepts. He was always talking with National Weather Service forecasters, with NOAA, working to see, that's his team meteorologist on the right, talking about the rotation. They would have full camera gear. They worked a lot with National Geographic and the Discovery Channel to get incredible video, but more importantly, the research, because tornadoes are such a finite piece of a storm that we need to have the instrumentation in their path to be able to look them up. So one of the problems with the El Reno storm was it was coming right through town, and he was on the safe side of a storm, and it turned. So there is nothing safe about storms. That's why when you hear us say, when thunder roars, go indoors. Thunder and lightning are parts of severe thunderstorms, and lightning can actually strike 15 miles away from where the heart of the storm is. So this is some of his beautiful work. I was hoping to be able to show you some of his instrumentation, but the YouTube video was more advanced. This is Carl, his research partner. You can see the rain shaft here as the storm's beginning to collapse on itself, the rotation. Oh, it doesn't show his instrumentation. But it's pretty neat what he was able to do for us. Nobody has taken up his work since, but we still have meteorologists that we rely on throughout the country to go out and let us know what's happening on the ground as we're sitting at our computers. This is another YouTube video of him. So back to meteorologists. Now as I stare at my computers, this is what I'm looking at. You can see on the right the inbound, outbound of that circulation. You can see the bow echo there. That's a line of thunderstorms. And then we're also monitoring the moisture and the dry air. That's why you hear us talking about a dry line. We then, in 2007, advanced even more. On the far left, you see my satellite imagery. On the far right, you see some of my computer models. The Fujita scale was updated in 2007. So if you're hearing people talk about tornadoes and they're saying, oh, F7, you can correct them and say it's an EF7. It's an enhanced Fujita scale. And then after that, we started talking more about tsunamis and predicting what's happening far underneath the ground to be able to watch storm surge. Sometimes you'll hear people talk, especially here in California, about shake and bake. Earthquakes don't happen because it's hot. Earthquakes are far, far below the earth with the plates. Weather is 10,000 feet in the sky. So sometimes it's interesting that earthquakes can happen during hot weather, but the hot air is affecting this much of the soil and the earthquakes down here. But as meteorologists, we still want to know what's happening in the ocean. We want these dart detectors to let us know when waves are coming. So when we see something happening with the plates, we can let you know if there's a storm surge and we need to evacuate. In 2009, we had another upgrade of IBM's supercomputers. Oh, this was a cool video here. I think it's an NBC video. This is showing different types of hurricane winds, and this GIF will show you this little house being shredded apart. So when we talk about a Category 1, those are the fastest winds we've ever seen in Kern County. We've had some 150-mile-an-hour winds at our mountain peaks, which would technically be a Category 2, but where our people live, this is the most wind we'd ever get. Fences come down, maybe a tree or two, shingles. Well, when you're getting to a category 3, you're losing most of your trees, most of your roof. When you're getting to a category 4, you have extensive loss of life and damage. And a category 5 is wiped clean. So when you hear people talking about Hurricane Katrina back in 2005, that was dramatically powerful of a storm because of the category 5, the wind damage, the rain. Most people died because of the flooding. The levees broke and it flooded the town, and it was just awful. And as meteorologists, there's nothing we can do for that. But we work very closely with engineers, and they've completely redone the levees in New Orleans, if you've been. It's pretty cool. 2010, oh, this was another, I wish I could show you so much of this. This is talking about the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale. So that's when we went to the different categories all the way up to 5. Now we have dual pole radar. So instead of just the conventional radar on the left looking out to see if there are any signatures, that's hail, rain, bugs. Cars on I-5 will sometimes show up on my radar. We now have dual pole. So that's helping me better identify snow, hail, rain, and I can let you know what's coming and when. Finally, how are we doing on time, Andrea? 2 minutes before 5-minute warning. So let's do some more memes. Weatherman, the job where you don't get fired for being wrong. I don't like that joke, but it's very true. Meteorologists obviously compile all of our information together with the variables that we have at the Earth's surface, the differences in the columns of air that we have. That's why we launch those weather balloons. That's why we have the radar at the ground, the satellites in the sky. But then we have different parameters that make it very difficult to forecast. So here in Kern County, you hear us talk a lot about our rain shadow. The best analogy I have for this is a monster truck. So you have our coastal range. Is this north? We have our coastal range. I don't know, I'm all turned around. Coastal range on the coast, obviously. You have the Tehachapi's. So out in Death Valley, they're a triple rain shadow. They are skipped by all of that rain because, like a monster truck, the rain comes in up over the coastal range. It skips most of the valley where the trashy little cars underneath, and it lands on the other ramp. And that's why sometimes we'll get 1/10 of an inch, and in the same exact storm at the same exact time, Tehachapi will get an entire inch of rain. We have different vertical layers that cause different problems with our weather. We have evaporation, we have winds, all playing different factors to create that rising air that cools and condenses, drops all the snow, and then the drier advances into our rain shadow of the valley. We still have some of the most fertile soil in the country because we're sitting in what was an ancient lake bed. So that's why farming is so successful here and so important to feed the country. But the weather is one of our farmers' biggest problems. When you're looking at your phone and you're trying to grab your forecast for the day and you're like, 40%, what does that mean? Well, that doesn't mean 40% out of 100% it will rain. What it actually means is that the probability of precipitation, you'll hear me talking about POPs, simply describes the probability that the forecast grid point, so that your part of the city, will receive at least 1/100th of an inch of rain. So 40% that your neighborhood, your exact school could be getting that rain, not a 40% out of the storm. This is a lot of what I do now. I have a weather station like this at my house. We have sources all over the city. The official gauge is at the airport, but we obviously look at several different ranges to be able to grab all of the weather that we want. Follow your favorite meteorologists on Twitter, on Facebook. Follow favorite news outlets' websites. Like I said, we'll send you push alerts. Follow social media. Just watch out because there are a lot of social trolls is a mean word, but they're trolls. People putting out misinformation because it's fun. Today's April Fool's Day, right? You have to treat social media like every single day is April Fool's Day. So trust the weather that you're getting from trustworthy sources, just like your teachers won't let you do a research paper without citing all your sources. The weather is the same thing. Don't believe anything that just pops up on your feed. And next time you complain a meteorologist is wrong, remember your bracket, predicting the future is hard. That's a funny meme. Okay. So find me on social, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. It's usually just pictures of clouds and my dogs, but I love talking with everybody about weather. Now that I've kind of talked you through all of the STEM components of weather, is anybody interested in this as a career? Crickets. Oh, yes, thank you very much. That was very kind of you to raise your hand, whether you're actually interested or not. Does anybody have any questions about TV news, about meteorology, about the science and math and engineering that goes into meteorology?
Raise your hand if you have a question, and I'll run over to you. But in the meantime, let's give Ms. Rusk a big round of applause.